The Desperate Call. Captain James Maxwell of the Earth Federation starship Prometheus gripped the distress message printout in his hand, his knuckles white. An urgent call from the alien Zoran Empire had come in, begging for help. A plague was wiping them out. Maxwell knew humanity had no love for the Zoran. They'd been enemies for a century. But this plague was unnatural, a bioweapon, and it threatened the entire galaxy if it jumped to other species. He had to act. His ship touched down on the Zoran homeworld. Soldiers leveled plasma rifles at him, and the Zoran Emperor glared with suspicion and hostility. Maxwell had to convince them to let him help. If he failed, the Zoran would go extinct, and if he couldn't find the cure in time, the plague could spread and wipe out humanity next. The clock was ticking. Dr. Novak rubbed her bleary eyes, fighting off exhaustion as she peered into the microscope. She had lost track of how many hours she had been in the lab, studying samples of the plague ravaging the Zoran population. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders. If she couldn't find a cure, an entire species could be wiped out. She adjusted the focus, her breath catching in her throat as she noticed something peculiar about the bioweapon's genetic structure. It was unlike anything she had ever seen before, a complex web of DNA that seemed to be constantly evolving and adapting. But there, hidden among the twisting strands, was a potential weakness, a tiny flaw in the design that could be exploited. Dr. Novak leaned back in her chair, her mind racing with possibilities. If she could find a way to target that weakness, she might be able to develop a cure. But it wouldn't be easy. She would need access to advanced technology and resources that the Zorans simply didn't have. She glanced at the clock, realizing that she was late for her meeting with Captain Maxwell. She gathered up her notes and hurried out of the lab, her thoughts still swirling with the implications of her discovery. Meanwhile, Captain Maxwell and Lieutenant Commander Reeves were deep in discussion, poring over the intelligence reports they had gathered on the Crador. They had uncovered a disturbing pattern. The Crador had been secretly infiltrating Zoran society for years, sabotaging their defenses and leaving them vulnerable to attack. "They've been playing the long game," Reeves said, his jaw clenched with anger, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Maxwell nodded grimly. "And now they've unleashed this plague as part of their plan. We have to stop them before it's too late." They knew they needed more information, and there was only one way to get it, by capturing a high-ranking Crador operative. It was a risky move, but they had no choice. As they made their plans, tensions were rising between the humans and the Zoran. Many Zoran blamed the humans for their current predicament, accusing them of bringing the plague to their world. There were calls for the humans to be expelled from the planet, and some even suggested taking them hostage to force their cooperation. Emperor Zorik struggled to maintain control over his people, his own grief and desperation threatening to overwhelm him. He had already lost so many of his own family members to the plague, and he knew that time was running out. In the streets, protests and riots were breaking out as the Zoran demanded action. The palace guards had their hands full trying to keep the peace, and there were whispers of a possible coup attempt. Dr. Novak burst into the room, her face flushed with excitement. "Captain, I think I might have found something," she said breathlessly. Maxwell and Reeves looked up, their attention immediately focused on the doctor. "What did you find?" Maxwell asked. Dr. Novak explained her discovery, the potential weakness in the bioweapon's genetic structure, but she also emphasized the challenges they would face in developing a cure. Maxwell's brow furrowed as he listened, weighing the options in his mind. He knew they needed the Zorans' cooperation if they were going to have any chance of success, but he also knew that trust was in short supply at the moment. He exchanged a glance with Reeves, a silent communication passing between them. They had to tread carefully, navigating the delicate political situation while also doing everything in their power to stop the Crador and find a cure for the plague. "Let me talk to Zorik again," Maxwell said finally. "I'll do my best to convince him to work with us. In the meantime, keep working on analyzing that weakness. We need to move fast if we're going to save their people and stop this plague from spreading. Reeves nodded, his expression determined. I'll assemble my team on the double. He turned to go, pausing only briefly to wish each other luck. There was no time for lengthy goodbyes, not with the fate of an entire species hanging in the balance. Race against time. Captain Maxwell stared at the blinking communication console, his heart heavy with the weight of the decision he was about to make. He knew that revealing the existence of the plague to the Earth Federation could lead to a full-scale war with the Krator, but with each passing day, more Zoran lives were lost. He couldn't stand by and watch an entire species be wiped out. He took a deep breath and opened a secure channel to Earth. This is Captain James Maxwell of the Prometheus. I have an urgent message for the Federation Council. The response came quickly, the face of Admiral Akira Tanaka appearing on the screen. Captain Maxwell, this is an unexpected communication. What's the situation? Maxwell detailed the events of the past few weeks, the discovery of the plague and the Krator involvement. He held nothing back, emphasizing the severity of the threat and the need for immediate action. Admiral Tanaka listened intently, his expression growing more somber with each word. This is a grave situation, Captain. The Krator's actions cannot go unanswered. I will convene an emergency meeting of the Federation Council and request that reinforcements and resources be sent to aid in the development of a cure. Maxwell felt a glimmer of hope, but it was short-lived. He knew that the arrival of human ships in Zoran space would only further inflame tensions between the two species. His fears were confirmed when the first Federation ships entered Zoran orbit. The streets erupted in chaos, with Zoran protesting what they saw as a prelude to an invasion. Emperor Zorik struggled to maintain control, his own people turning against him for allowing the humans to intervene. In the midst of the turmoil, Dr. Novak and her team worked tirelessly to synthesize a cure using the advanced technology provided by the Federation. They had made progress, but time was running out. Every minute that passed meant more Zoran lives lost. As if the situation couldn't get any worse, a splinter faction of Zoran extremists emerged, led by the charismatic and ruthless Zorakar. They saw the humans as the true enemy and launched a series of attacks against the Prometheus and her crew. Lieutenant Commander Reeves rushed into the command center, his face grim. Captain, we have reports of multiple explosions in the city. Zorakar's faction has targeted our supply lines and is attempting to sabotage Dr. Novak's work. Maxwell slammed his fist on the console, frustration and anger boiling over. We can't let them succeed. Reeves, assemble a team and secure the lab. We need to protect Dr. Novak and her team at all costs. As Reeves left to carry out his orders, Maxwell turned to the view screen where Emperor Zorik's face was etched with worry. Emperor, I know our presence here has caused unrest among your people, but we cannot let Zorakar's faction derail our efforts. We must work together to stop the Krator and find a cure. Zorik nodded, his voice strained. I understand, Captain. I will do what I can to quell the unrest and ensure that Dr. Novak's work can continue unimpeded. The Krator, sensing an opportunity in the chaos, launched their own attacks, targeting key Zoran infrastructure and attempting to sabotage the cure. Maxwell and his crew fought back, engaging in fierce battles both on the ground and in space. The Prometheus shuddered as another blast rocked the ship. Alarms blared and crew members scrambled to their stations. Maxwell gripped the arms of his chair, his knuckles white. They had been fighting off Krator attacks for hours, and the ship was taking a beating. Shields down to 30%. The tactical officer shouted over the din. We can't take much more of this, Captain. Maxwell gritted his teeth. Divert all available power to shields and weapons. We have to hold them off long enough for Dr. Novak to finish the cure. In the lab, Dr. Novak and her team worked feverishly, sweat dripping down their faces as they raced against time. They were close, so close to a breakthrough. Just a few more tests, a few more adjustments. The lab doors burst open and Lieutenant Commander Reeves rushed in, his face smeared with soot and blood. "Dr. Novak, we need to evacuate. Zorakar's faction has breached the perimeter and is headed this way." Dr. Novak shook her head, her eyes blazing with determination. "No, I can't leave. Not now. We're so close to a cure. I just need a little more time." Reeves hesitated for a moment, then nodded. He understood the weight of what was at stake. "Okay, but we need to hurry. My team will hold them off as long as we can." As Reeves and his team took up defensive positions, Dr. Novak and her colleagues worked with renewed urgency. The sounds of battle grew louder, explosions and weapons fire echoing through the halls. In the command center, Maxwell watched the situation unfold on the view screen, his heart pounding in his chest. They were running out of time. If Dr. Novak couldn't find a cure, if the Crador succeeded in their sabotage, then all hope would be lost. Suddenly, Dr. Novak's voice crackled over the comm. "Captain Maxwell, we've done it. We have a cure." Maxwell felt a surge of relief and hope, but it was short-lived. The Crador, sensing their impending defeat, launched a final desperate attack. The Prometheus shook violently as a barrage of missiles slammed into her hull. "Captain, we've lost propulsion." The helmsman cried out. "We're dead in the water." Maxwell's mind raced, searching for a solution. They had the cure, but they needed to get it to the Zoran before it was too late. He turned to Reeves, who had just returned from the lab with Dr. Novak and her team. "Reeves, take a shuttle and get that cure down to the surface. We'll hold off the Crador as long as we can." Reeves nodded, his expression grim but determined. "Aye, Captain." As Reeves and Dr. Novak boarded the shuttle, Maxwell turned to his crew. "This is it, people. We've come too far to let the Crador win now. Let's show them what humanity is made of." The crew responded with a resounding cheer, their resolve strengthened by their captain's words. They fought with everything they had, pouring their hearts and souls into the battle. The last stand. On the surface, Emperor Zorak rallied his own forces, leading the charge against Zorakar's faction and the Crador infiltrators. The streets of the capital city became a battleground, with Zoran and humans fighting side by side against a common enemy. Reeves and Dr. Novak fought their way through the chaos, the cure clutched tightly in their hands. They had to get it to the Emperor to distribute it to the Zoran people before it was too late. As they approached the palace, a group of Crador soldiers emerged from the shadows, weapons trained on the shuttle. Reeves cursed under his breath, knowing they were outgunned and outmatched. But just as the Crador were about to open fire, a blast of energy slammed into them from behind. Emperor Zorak stood tall, a smoking blaster in his hand and a fierce determination in his eyes. "Go," he shouted to Reeves and Dr. Novak. "Get the cure to my people." Reeves nodded, and the shuttle lifted off, racing toward the Zoran medical centers. The cure was distributed quickly, and within hours, the tide began to turn. The plague, which had claimed so many lives, was finally being pushed back. On the Prometheus, Maxwell and his crew fought with renewed vigor, knowing that their mission was almost complete. They had faced impossible odds, but they had persevered. They had saved a species from extinction and prevented a galactic war. As the last Crador ship exploded in a burst of flame and debris, Maxwell allowed himself a moment of relief. They had done it. They had won. But even as he savored the victory, he knew that the road ahead would not be easy. The Zoran and the humans had fought together, but the wounds of the past would take time to heal. Trust would have to be rebuilt, and old animosities would have to be set aside. But for now, in this moment, they could celebrate. They had achieved the impossible, and they had done it together. Lieutenant Commander Reeves burst into Captain Maxwell's quarters, his face pale and his hands trembling. "Captain, you need to see this," he said, his voice unsteady as he handed over a datapad. Maxwell took the device, his brow furrowing as he scanned the contents. His eyes widened in disbelief as he read the damning evidence Reeves had uncovered. "This can't be right," he muttered, looking up at Reeves. Admiral Novak, Dr. Novak's mother. She's been working with the Krator. Reeves nodded grimly. I double and triple checked the data. It's true, sir. Admiral Novak has been collaborating with the Krator, helping them create the bioweapon that's ravaging the Zoran. Maxwell sank into his chair, his mind reeling. Admiral Arera Novak was a legend in the Earth Federation, a brilliant strategist and a champion of human supremacy. He had always admired her, even if he didn't always agree with her methods. But this was beyond the pale. Why would she do this? He asked, more to himself than to Reeves. Reeves hesitated for a moment before replying. According to the data, she believes that the Zoran and other alien species are a threat to human dominance in the galaxy. She sees the plague as a way to ensure that humans remain the top dogs. Maxwell felt a wave of revulsion wash over him. The idea that someone in the Federation, someone he had trusted and respected, could be capable of such a thing was sickening. He stood up, his jaw clenched with determination. We have to stop her, he said. We have to find a way to expose her treachery and secure the cure. Reeves nodded in agreement. But, sir, we have to be careful. We don't know who else in the Federation might be involved. And if Emperor Zorik finds out about this? Maxwell grimaced. He knew that the Zoran would be furious if they learned of the Federation's involvement in the creation of the bioweapon. They would see it as the ultimate betrayal, and they would have every right to. We'll have to keep this quiet for now, he said. We can't risk tipping off Admiral Novak or her allies, and we can't let the Zoran find out. At least not until we have the cure and can prove that we're on their side. Reeves looked uneasy, but he nodded in agreement. What about Dr. Novak? He asked. Should we tell her about her mother's involvement? Maxwell hesitated. He knew that Dr. Novak was working tirelessly to find a cure for the plague, and he didn't want to distract her or burden her with this knowledge. But he also knew that she deserved to know the truth. Not yet, he said finally. Let's focus on getting the cure first. Once we have it, we can decide how to break the news to her. Reeves nodded, and the two men set to work, poring over the data and trying to come up with a plan. They knew that they were up against a formidable enemy, one with resources and influence that stretched across the galaxy. As they worked, a message came in from Emperor Zorik. Maxwell felt his stomach drop as he read the contents. The Zoran leader had somehow learned of the Federation's involvement in the creation of the bioweapon, and he was demanding that all humans leave Zoran space immediately. If they refused, he would unleash the full might of the Zoran military against them. Maxwell cursed under his breath. He knew that they couldn't abandon the Zoran. Not now, not when they were so close to finding a cure. But he also knew that they couldn't risk an all-out war between the humans and the Zoran. He turned to Reeves, his expression grim. We need to find a way to expose Admiral Novak and her allies, and we need to do it fast. If we can prove to Emperor Zorik that we're on his side, that we're working to stop the Krator and the Rogue Federation faction, maybe we can avoid a war. Reeves nodded, his own expression just as grim. I have some contacts in Federation intelligence, he said. I'll see if they can dig up any more information on Admiral Novak and her associates. Maxwell nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope. Good. In the meantime, I'll try to stall Emperor Zorik, buy us some more time. The two men set to work, each focused on their own tasks. They knew that the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and that they were the only ones who could stop the impending catastrophe. As Maxwell worked to keep the Zoran from declaring war, Dr. Novak and her team continued their tireless efforts to find a cure for the plague. They were so close, so tantalizingly close, but every time they thought they had a breakthrough, something would go wrong. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Commander Reeves worked his contacts in Federation intelligence, trying to uncover more information about Admiral Novak and her allies. He spent long hours poring over classified documents and encrypted communications, piecing together the puzzle of the rogue faction's plans. And all the while, the Krator continued their attacks, growing bolder and more desperate with each passing day. They knew that their time was running out, that the humans and the Zoran were closing in on a cure that would end their plans for galactic domination. Captain Maxwell felt the weight of the world on his shoulders as he navigated the delicate political situation, trying to keep the peace between the humans and the Zoran, while also working to expose the rogue Federation faction. He knew that one wrong move could spark an interstellar war, one that would cost countless lives on both sides. But he also knew that he couldn't give up, that he had to keep fighting for what was right, no matter the cost. He thought of the Zoran, of the millions of lives that had already been lost to the plague, and he knew that he would do whatever it took to save them. And so he pressed on, determined to see this mission through to the end, no matter what challenges lay ahead. He had faith in his crew, in Dr. Novak and her team, and in the strength and resilience of the human spirit. They would find a way to stop the Crador and the Rogue Federation faction. They would find a cure for the plague and save the Zoran from extinction. And they would do it together, united in their common cause, their shared humanity. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, but Captain Maxwell knew that they would not fail. They could not fail. Too much was at stake. Too many lives depended on their success. And so they fought on, against all odds, against all enemies, knowing that the only way forward was through, and that the only way to win was to never give up, to never surrender, to never stop fighting for what was right. The revelation. Captain Maxwell stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, staring at the star map projected before him. Dr. Novak was by his side, her face pale with exhaustion, but her eyes still burning with determination. They had come so far, but they were running out of time. "We need a new plan," Maxwell said, his voice tight with tension. "The Prometheus has advanced shielding technology, far beyond anything the Zoran or the Crador possess. If we can modify the shields to create a massive energy field around the Zoran homeworld, we might be able to quarantine the planet and prevent the plague from spreading." Dr. Novak's eyes widened, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten as she considered the implications of Maxwell's plan. "It could work," she said slowly, "but the energy required to maintain a field of that size would be enormous, and we'd need to calibrate the field precisely to allow for the passage of essential supplies and personnel." Maxwell nodded, his jaw set with determination. "We'll have to divert power from all non-essential systems and work around the clock to modify the shields. But it's our best chance to contain the plague and give you more time to find a cure." As they set to work, news of their plan spread quickly through the ship and beyond. The reactions were swift and divisive. Many of the Zoran, already wary of human interference, saw the energy field as a violation of their sovereignty and a potential threat to their way of life. They argued that the humans had no right to dictate the fate of their world, and that the field would only serve to isolate and weaken them. On the other side of the debate, members of the Earth Federation expressed concerns about the potential military applications of the technology, fearing that it could upset the delicate balance of power in the galaxy. They worried that if the Crador or other hostile species were to get their hands on the technology, they could use it to create impenetrable defenses and launch attacks with impunity. As the arguments raged on, tensions on the Zoran homeworld reached a boiling point. Emperor Zorik, already struggling to maintain control in the face of the plague and civil unrest, found himself besieged on all sides by those who opposed the human plan and those who saw it as their only hope for survival. In the midst of the chaos, the Crador saw their opportunity to strike. A massive fleet of Crador warships, armed with the latest in weapons technology, suddenly appeared in orbit around the Zoran homeworld, catching the defenders off guard. The Crador launched a brutal assault on the planet's surface, targeting major population centers and strategic military installations. Captain Maxwell and his crew found themselves in the middle of a devastating battle, fighting alongside Emperor Zorik and his loyal forces to repel the Crador invasion. The Prometheus's advanced weapon systems proved invaluable in the fight, but the sheer numbers of the Krydor attackers threatened to overwhelm them at every turn. On the ground, Lieutenant Commander Reeves led a small team of trusted officers on a dangerous mission to gather evidence of Admiral Novik's treachery and bring her to justice. They fought their way through the war-torn streets of the Zoran capital, dodging Krydor patrols and battling rogue Federation operatives who sought to silence them at every turn. As the battle raged on, Dr. Novik and her team worked frantically to modify the Prometheus' shields and calibrate the energy field. Time was running out, and they knew that every minute they delayed meant more lives lost to the plague and the Krydor. Finally, with the Krydor forces closing in on the Prometheus and the Zoran defenses on the verge of collapse, Captain Maxwell made the fateful decision to activate the energy field. He knew that it was a desperate gamble and that there was no guarantee that it would work, but he also knew that it was their only chance to stop the plague and prevent the Krydor from achieving their genocidal goals. With a heavy heart, Maxwell gave the order to divert all power to the shields and activate the field. The Prometheus shuddered as the massive energy surge coursed through its systems, and for a moment, everything went dark. Then, slowly, a shimmering blue field began to emanate from the ship, expanding outward in all directions like a wave of light. It passed through the Krydor ships and the Zoran defenses, engulfing the entire planet in its ethereal glow. For a moment, everything was still. The Krydor ships hung motionless in space, their weapons systems suddenly offline. On the surface, the fighting ceased as soldiers on both sides stared up at the sky in awe and confusion. Then, as if on cue, the Krydor ships began to retreat, their commanders realizing that they had been outmaneuvered. The Zoran forces cheered as they watched their enemies flee, their hope rekindled by the sudden turn of events. But even as they celebrated, the crew of the Prometheus knew that their mission was far from over. The energy field had bought them some time, but it was only a temporary solution. They still needed to find a cure for the plague, and they needed to bring Admiral Novik and her collaborators to justice. As they set course for Earth, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, they knew that the choices they had made would have consequences that would reverberate throughout the galaxy for generations to come. But they also knew that they had done what they believed was right, and that they had given the Zoran a chance to survive and rebuild. The home stretch. Captain Maxwell and his crew arrived back on Earth, the Prometheus docking under high security conditions. The news of their success in containing the plague and repelling the Krydor invasion had spread, but so had the rumors of Admiral Novik's involvement in the creation of the bioweapon. Maxwell knew that the hardest part of their mission was still ahead. As they disembarked, they were met by a delegation from the Earth Federation, led by Admiral Tanaka. "Welcome back, Captain," Tanaka said, his expression grave. "We have a lot to discuss." Maxwell nodded. "Yes, Admiral. We have the evidence we need to expose Admiral Novik and her collaborators, but we need to act quickly before they can cover their tracks." Tanaka gestured for them to follow him. "Come with me. We have a secure briefing room where we can go over everything." In the briefing room, Maxwell, Reeves, and Dr. Novik laid out the evidence they had gathered. They showed the encrypted communications, the classified documents, and the data they had retrieved from the Krydor operatives. It was damning evidence, implicating Admiral Novik and several high-ranking officials in the creation and deployment of the bioweapon. Admiral Tanaka listened intently, his expression growing more somber with each piece of evidence. "This is worse than I thought," he said finally. "We need to take immediate action. I'll convene an emergency meeting of the Federation Council and present this evidence. Admiral Novik and her collaborators will be arrested and brought to justice." Maxwell nodded. "Thank you, Admiral. We also need to secure the cure for the plague and distribute it to the Zoran. They need to know that we are on their side, that we are committed to helping them recover." Tanaka agreed. "I'll make sure the necessary resources are allocated. We'll get the cure to the Zoran as quickly as possible." As the meeting ended, Maxwell pulled Dr. Novik aside. "There's something else you need to know," he said gently. "It's about your mother." Dr. Novak's eyes widened in shock as Maxwell explained her mother's involvement in the creation of the bioweapon. She listened in stunned silence, her face pale. "I can't believe it," she whispered. "How could she do this?" Maxwell placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "I know this is hard to hear, but we need you now more than ever. You're the key to finding a cure for the plague and stopping the Crater's plans." Dr. Novak nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "I'll do whatever it takes to find the cure and bring those responsible to justice." With the support of the Earth Federation, the crew of the Prometheus set to work. Dr. Novak and her team continued their research, refining the cure and preparing it for mass production. Meanwhile, Maxwell and Reeves coordinated with Federation intelligence to track down and arrest Admiral Novak and her collaborators. The days that followed were a blur of activity. Arrests were made, evidence was presented, and the Federation Council convened to address the crisis. Admiral Novak and her allies were stripped of their positions and charged with crimes against humanity. In the midst of the turmoil, the cure for the plague was finally ready. Federation ships, loaded with the cure, set course for the Zoran homeworld. Maxwell and his crew accompanied them, determined to see their mission through to the end. When they arrived, they were met with a mix of relief and suspicion. The Zoran were grateful for the cure, but the wounds of betrayal ran deep. It would take time to rebuild trust and heal the scars of the past. As the cure was distributed and the plague began to recede, Captain Maxwell addressed the Zoran people. "We came here as enemies, but we leave as friends. We share a common enemy in the Crater, and together, we have overcome a great threat. Let us build a future of cooperation and peace for the sake of our children and our worlds." The Zoran responded with cautious optimism. They had seen the worst of humanity, but they had also seen the best. And in the end, it was the best of humanity that had prevailed. The aftermath. With the cure distributed and the plague finally under control, the Zoran began the long process of rebuilding their society. The Prometheus remained in orbit, providing support and assistance as needed. Captain Maxwell and his crew worked tirelessly to help the Zoran recover, forging bonds of friendship and trust that would last for generations. Emperor Zorik, now fully recovered from the plague, expressed his gratitude to the crew of the Prometheus. "You have saved my people from extinction," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "We will never forget your bravery and sacrifice. The Zoran Empire owes you a debt that can never be repaid." Maxwell smiled. "We did what we had to do, Emperor, and we couldn't have done it without the courage and resilience of your people. Together, we have shown that we can overcome any challenge, no matter how great." As the weeks passed, the Zoran and the humans worked side by side, repairing infrastructure, restoring order, and laying the foundation for a new era of cooperation. The bond between the two species grew stronger with each passing day, and the scars of the past began to heal. Back on Earth, the trials of Admiral Novak and her collaborators were in full swing. The evidence presented by Maxwell and his team left no doubt about their guilt. They were convicted of crimes against humanity and sentenced to life in prison. Dr. Novak struggled with the revelation of her mother's betrayal, but she found solace in her work. She dedicated herself to advancing medical science and ensuring that such a catastrophe could never happen again. Captain Maxwell was hailed as a hero, not just on Earth, but throughout the galaxy. His actions had prevented a galactic war and saved countless lives. He was promoted to admiral and given command of a new fleet, tasked with maintaining peace and security in the galaxy. Lieutenant Commander Reeves was also promoted, his bravery and leadership recognized by the Federation. He continued to serve at Maxwell's side, their bond stronger than ever after all they had been through. As the Prometheus prepared to leave Zoran space and return to Earth, Maxwell reflected on the journey they had undertaken. They had faced impossible odds, but they had persevered. They had saved a species from extinction, prevented a galactic war, and forged a new alliance that would shape the future of the galaxy. Standing on the bridge of the Prometheus, Maxwell addressed his crew. "We've been through a lot together," he said. "We've faced challenges that no one could have predicted, and we've come out stronger for it. I couldn't be prouder of each and every one of you. This isn't the end of our journey, but the beginning of a new chapter. Together, we'll continue to explore the stars, to seek out new life and new civilizations, and to boldly go where no one has gone before." The crew cheered, their spirits lifted by their captain's words. They knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, united in their common purpose and their shared humanity. As the Prometheus entered warp and sped away from the Zoran homeworld, Captain Maxwell looked out at the stars, his heart filled with hope and determination. They had made a miracle, and they would continue to make miracles, one step at a time, one star at a time. The journey had just begun. The legacy, years passed, and the story of the Prometheus and its crew became legend. The alliance between the Zoran and the Earth Federation grew stronger, fostering a new era of peace and cooperation in the galaxy. The two species shared their knowledge and resources, exploring the stars together and pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Admiral Maxwell and his fleet became known as the Guardians of the Galaxy, a symbol of hope and unity in a time of uncertainty. They patrolled the stars, protecting the innocent and ensuring that the horrors of the past could never be repeated. Dr. Novik's work led to groundbreaking advancements in medical science, curing diseases that had plagued the galaxy for centuries. Her dedication and perseverance inspired a new generation of scientists and doctors, all driven by the desire to make the universe a better place. Lieutenant Commander Reeves continued to serve with distinction, his loyalty and bravery earning him the respect of his peers and the admiration of those he protected. He and Maxwell remained close friends, their bond unbreakable after all they had endured together. The Zoran Empire flourished, rebuilding their society and expanding their influence across the stars. Emperor Zorik became a beloved leader, his wisdom and compassion guiding his people through the challenges of the new era. The Krator, their plans for galactic domination thwarted, retreated into the shadows, but the threat they posed remained, and the Guardians of the Galaxy stood ever vigilant, ready to defend the peace they had fought so hard to achieve. As the years went by, the story of the Prometheus and its crew was told and retold, a testament to the power of courage, determination, and the unbreakable bonds of friendship. It became a beacon of hope for all who heard it, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, miracles were possible. And so, the legacy of the Prometheus lived on, a shining example of what humanity could achieve when they stood together, united in their common purpose and their shared humanity. The journey continued, one step at a time, one star at a time, as the Guardians of the Galaxy explored the endless possibilities of the universe, always ready to make the next miracle happen.